Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Seville, a legacy of enchantment. Numerous romantic travellers and foreign writers and artists began to include Andalusia in what was termed the Grand Tour in the first quarter of the 19th century. Most notably, Robert Dundas, Murray and Washington Irving and Lord Byron. Most of them headed straight to Seville, a city which until then was little known to the outside world. Tony Bryant is taking a step back in time and taking us back to the Seville that many of us might not know beyond what we now see as sort of 21st century to Seville. I'm delighted to say that Tony joins me live on the line from the Corazon de Sevilla, the heart of Seville. It's Tony Bryant. Tony, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Giles. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. You survived Semana. You've been at the mother node because you've been in Sevilla for Semana Santa. That must be a sensory overload, my friend.
It's great, actually, Giles, because for me, I've been coming to Seville for more than 30 years for Semana Santa, so I've got to know a lot of people. So rather than just standing on the roadside watching them come along, I actually get invited to walk along with some of the processions and get the chance to go underneath the float, which a lot of people don't get to see because obviously they're all hidden underneath. So it's quite an experience, and it goes far way beyond religion for me. It's just incredible. It's the ambience. And I suppose it's the same in all Andalusian capitals, you know, the big places, same in Malaga, Granada, wherever you are. It's just an incredible ambience. And if you just go with the flow, it's great. A bit tiring.
Yeah, a bit tiring. But the thing is, there's a time link because these processions like that, and you could be in your village. I mean, you could be in your market, you know, your market town. I mean, I used to live in a place called Campillos. I now live in Coín, and those processions. And it doesn't matter how I mean, obviously the bigger one is Seville and Malaga as well, but it's the passion which we don't seem to get in 21st century Northern Europe so much, and it's a direct time link to the period that we're talking about as well, Tony.
I mean, it amazes me is everyone involved in the procession, from the people that carry it to the people who do the flowers, and even the guy who goes along and relights the candles, you know, when they blow out. It's just everyone is so involved and so captivated by it. For me, it's like you say, we don't have anything like that in the UK, or we certainly didn't when I used to live there 30 odd years ago. But it's you know, I often think a lot of the Brits wouldn't carry one of them if you paid them, let alone do it for the pure passion.
I mean, before I went to see Semana Santa in Spain, I think the closest I'd be was bopping around with a can of Red Stripe behind a float at Notting Hill Carnival circa 1988. But there you go.
Yeah. I was probably there, actually. I used to love Notting Hill.
So explain to those who don't know you what you actually do in Seville, because you're an expert in flamenco as well, and I could speak to you about modern flamenco and Cameron and jazz flamenco and everything from Rosalia to Chambao, who we just played now. But I mean, what's your background, you know, in Seville, and how did you get down that particular rabbit hole, as it were?
Well, it's quite a long story, but I'll try and cut it right down. I was a musician in Britain. I played all my life on the punk scene, and I grew up listening to jazz and blues from my parents. And I came to Spain in 1994, and I was based in Malaga, and I came to Seville for a weekend, and somebody took me to a flamenco peña, or like an authentic club. And it was in a downstairs basement, and it was a bit scary, and there was only about half a dozen people in the room, and three of them were me and the two people I were with, and the rest were the artists. And it was what they call cantihunda, which is the deep song.
That's the heavy stuff. That's the really heavy stuff.
Yeah, and I listened to this guy at the time. I thought, can you call that singing? Because it did sound like most people think, like a lot of wailing, you know? But there was something, and it made my skin tingle, and it reminded me a little of the very early blues, you know, when it was just a guy with an acoustic guitar stamping his foot to the rhythm.
Yep.
There's many similarities, but I couldn't understand a word they were singing about, and even today it's still difficult. It doesn't matter how good your Spanish is to understand the pure gypsy stuff. It's very difficult, but something clicked, and I thought, what is this? So I tried to find out, and I started to speak to some Spanish friends of mine in Seville. They started to explain it, but it was so complicated. And one of the problems, Giles, is at that time there wasn't that much written about flamenco in English. So it was very difficult, especially if you didn't speak Spanish. So I sort of set out on this little journey to try and find out. People said, oh, you must go to the festivals in the summer and you must go to this village. So I travelled around Andalusia, visiting sort of predominantly gypsy towns, places like Utrera and Lebrija, which are in the Campino of Seville. And I just got accepted. I'm 6'3" Englishman who couldn't speak hardly any English, any Spanish at the time. But somebody opened the door for me and introduced me to a large gypsy family, and we got chatting. And then they started inviting me to things like baptisms and family celebrations. So that's how it started. And I was very lucky because I knew somebody who worked for the Junta de Andalusia, and she introduced me to the Flamenco Dance Museum in Seville. And I was sort of writing a book at the time, and they said, we'll publish it. So that was sort of the really swung the gates open for me, because the Museo de Baile Flamenco in Seville, they published my first book, and they published, I've written a trilogy about flamenco, which they published all three. So that's how I really got going. And over the years, I just got to know just about all the top artists.
Yeah.
But as you say, one of the things that I set out to do was explain, because when you say flamenco today, it's like you just said, it's like the term rhythm and blues. It's an umbrella term for a wide range of music. So if you go into a record shop you want flamenco and you've listened to Cameron and you end up pulling out someone like La Fernanda de Utrera, you're thinking, what the hell is this? They're so different.
Yeah.
So the first book I set out to sort of explain to them what the difference is.
And I'm just really interested because I'm thinking rhythm and blues, because so many of the rhythm and blues in the 50s is like all basically doo-wop, and then we get rhythm and blues in the late 60s, and then you get rhythm and blues in the 70s, and then you get rhythm and blues which is basically rap music. So same thing. We could talk about music all day. I can tell for this one, Tony. But we'll get you on. We'll get you in another time on that one, because I'm with you 100% with the whole thing about flamenco and Delta blues, because they are the same. It's the same shared experience, and Gitano culture and deep South culture as well, because I've been, like I said, I used to live up in Gambillos area, and I've been in that sort of thing, and I've been with Gitano families, and when they discover that my roots are Scottish and we have family trees, and they're like, well, somos iguales, we're the same kind of peoples. And if you are welcomed in, you are absolutely welcomed in, aren't you, Tony?
Yeah, it's incredible. A lot of people say, but the people were warning me at first, be careful of the gypsies. And there are obviously areas where you have to be careful, but in some of the small towns and the villages, it's just an. And of course, you get to see the real thing, because flamenco is a family thing. They do it for their own enjoyment and for their own celebration. So if you manage to come across, somebody's birthday party when it just takes off. You know what I mean? There's no warning. It's incredible.
Now, let's get back and talk about, you're coming back on, Tony. We'll get you on about this. But the thing is, you're looking at Seville. Now, the first time I went to Seville was before I went down to do a report for a magazine, and it must have been 1990. And we were taken around La Cartuja, the site they were going to start building on. And I hadn't been to Seville before, so I did all the bits and pieces. And, I did a Geralda, and I had a look around here, and this flatland they were building, basically, at the time. It was nothing on it, basically. Yeah, apart from La Cartuja, apart from the tobacco place itself. Back in the day, Seville, in what we're looking at, the 19th century, it's exotic. It's got that touch of Al Andalus, when the Moors ruled huge swathes, the Caliphate of Cordoba, etc., etc. So for a personage such as Lord Byron, etc., it was as exciting as going to the dusky lands of the Levant, but it didn't take long to get there, and it was a little bit safer.
Yeah, I think at that time, Giles, because when these people started arriving, Lord Byron was one of the first British romantics as such to arrive in Seville. And he came just after the French invasion. It was during the War of Independencia. So I mean, it was still enclosed in its walls, and it was very small, and basically it was the where the cathedral, the Alcazar, and that area, Santa Cruz, it was all enclosed, and the outside was nothing. There was like dirt tracks down to the river. There was only one footbridge over into Triana. I mean, it was a completely different. It must have been incredible for them when they walked through the gates into Seville, just to see the size of like the castle, the Alcázar. I mean, it's just incredible.
And if you think they're coming from a situation which is becoming the industrialised Britain, I mean, the industrialised, those dark satanic mills, which Blake writes about, etc. This is and they're knocking down castles to put factories on. This is the other side of it. And of course, you've got the river, and the river is, imports the gold. I mean, and I know Cadiz gets a lot of it, but a lot of it comes up to Seville during that quote unquote golden period, of Felipe and the Reyes Católicos. But, it transfers, people don't think about Seville and its connection to the water so much now because of the state of the river. But that is one of the main things that gave it its wealth and its structure, wasn't it?
Yeah, of course.
So tell me a little bit about what their first impressions was, and B, if you drive around Andalusia, you will see signposts about the Ruta de Washington Irving, and you might think, well, who is he? Why is he so important? And he's American, isn't it? And why the American experience of coming to Andalusia, in particular Seville?
I think at the time, 19th century, we had what they termed the Grand Tour. Which originally they excluded Spain because it was thought to be too backwards. But eventually, I think Byron was one of the first to include it in the Grand Tour to come to Andalusia. And Washington Irving, he came and travelled around on horseback. He spent a year in Seville, so I focused on him in the book. But he also spent quite a bit of time in Granada, in the Alhambra, which he wrote the Tales of the Alhambra. But these people came from fairly wealthy backgrounds. So, he lived in the Alhambra when it was basically falling down before it was renovated and like we see today, it was crumbling to the floor at that time. So to come from America or England, from a wealthy background, to suddenly be faced with that, the culture shock must have been incredible, but they seemed to embrace it because it was the romantic, the Oriental feeling which you didn't get in England. You found that in 19th century London. But they certainly with Seville, because it just, for me, it's that Seville's got this mystical feeling, and I love Andalusia. I've visited all the main sort of the 8 cities. Yep. And they're all wonderful, but there's something about Seville that really does seem to be just that little touch above the rest of them. And it's not so much for the architecture, because Granada, Cordoba, they've all got fantastic Moorish stuff and all that left behind. But I don't know, Seville for me is still as exciting today as it probably was then.
May I put my theory to you, Tony, about this one, if I may, sir? Yeah?
Yeah.
Here's my theory, because if you think about all great cities, they have a river running through them. You've got to have a river running through it, a big one, yeah? And you've got to have two sides. So you've got Buda and Pest, okay? You've got the two sides of the thing. You've got, Istanbul, Constantinople, you've got Asia and Europe. With you see, people might go, oh, Seville, but no, it's not, because you've got a river running through it, and then you've got Sevilla and you've got Triana, and those are the two sides. Yeah. Those are the two sides, which makes it great. And also, because it's not particularly, it's not like Granada where you take a wrong thing and you go down 100 meters because you've gone down a side street on a one-in-one incline, because that's the Almacén. But Seville is relatively on a plane, as it were, and so therefore the Giralda is, before we get the, Columbus's cathedral and all that, is a central point. And if you've been to Marrakesh, you'll know that is copied from that. And so you can almost hear the call to prayer coming out of the Giralda, and it brings that whole city together. It's like being within Bow Bells. If you're a Cockney, it's that whole thing. What do you think of that one?
Of course. Yeah. it's saying that. I don't know if you've ever been up to the top of the Giralda, but the views are incredible. But in that time, in the 19th century, when you went to the top of the Giralda, you were literally looking down on the area around the cathedral and looking out towards Triana. It was wasteland down to the river. Do you know what I mean? And of course it's true because, like you say, if you go to, I don't know, Granada, for example, like you say, up and down, whereas Seville is relatively flat. And when you get to my age and you're traipsing around, it's a lot easier to walk flat ground. But one of the things that amazed me, Giles, is you said that you was there in 1990 or 91, so
Yep.
you would have just before the Expo 92.
Correct, yeah.
Which were they were
building it.
on that land. But if you went back to 1929 when they had the first World Exposition, that's what gave me the idea for the book, because I just thought one day, I wonder what Seville would be like if they didn't host the 1929 exposition, because everything they built for that, i.e. Plaza de España and Parque Maria Luisa, all the grand sort of palaces and that they built, it would have been totally different. And I started researching what people like Byron and Richard Ford and Washington Irving said was basically outside of the walls, it was just solitude. There was nothing there. And that gave me the idea because, of course, what we see today when we traipse around by the cathedral is completely different than what they saw. And Seville, like everywhere, is just expanded and to the river. And even when you go over into Triana, Triana was predominantly Gitano area, and it was it was very dodgy at the time, in the 19th century. And a lot of the romantics were warned against going over the river into Triana. Whereas the ones who were inquisitive, which are a bit like myself today, they headed straight for it, So, the two exhibitions that have happened over the last 100 years have just changed the centre of Seville unbelievably.
Yeah, when I was walking around, because they'd already got the irrigation system in for the 92 Expo, and I like an idiot, because I didn't know half the stuff I do now. I said, well, where'd you get that idea of having the running waterfall? And he said, it's not looking nice. It keeps the temperature down, and that's what we learned from the Moors. And I was, mind officially blown. What was was it particularly dangerous? Because, this is the time of, bandidos in the countryside. This is why the Guardia Civil is formed, to keep, because, people who went on the Grand Tour, they expected to be sort of to pump into a sort of an Andalus version of Dick Turpin, didn't they? And be revealed.
I think a lot of them went out of their way to
exactly.
Experience. Richard Ford, for example, he got to know El Tempranillo, who was probably the most famous bandit of the time. And he met him on the road and struck up a friendship with him. And then he found that other people that were coming to Andalusia at the time, they were asking, is there any chance you can sort of, I want to be not murdered, but I want an experience with a bandolero. And they went out of their way to try and find them. What was the Prime Minister from England? Disraeli. He came out, spent time in Seville and then went over to Ronda, and he went out of his way. He was in his 20s at the time to have an encounter with a bandolero. I think in Triana at that time it was dangerous because there's an area today in Seville called Las 3,000 Viviendas.
Oh yes, indeed.
Which is the Gypsy district. Now there's two districts there. One of them's Miami. The most dangerous place to walk around in Seville. You wouldn't dare go in there.
No.
The police won't go in there, And in Triana at that time, it was very similar because you're talking of a race of people that people really didn't know about. There's fear, there's superstition, and then so it would have been dangerous, I think, to wander over there if you didn't know where you got, or you didn't go with someone who I've been to Tres Mil Viviendas, but I went with some gypsies.
With a guide, you went with a guide. Yeah.
I was still nervous, believe me. I didn't want to get out of the car.
Yeah.
Because it looks a bit like a battle zone, do you know what I mean?
What I love about those Tres Mil Viviendas is, if you ever watch Canal Sur and Deseo Directo, the two TV stations, they're forever going in there sometimes, and somebody's got a donkey or something on the 34th floor of their apartment.
It's incredible. It's got one of the biggest gang war, family wars areas. It's a dangerous place. It really is.
So how do you put this together? Did you sort of compile writings? You know your stuff, obviously, Tony. You've got access to sort of some archives or things to put this all together in a sort of
I've the books I've collected over the years, because I've been a writer for years, and I just buy. But I used to go to second-hand bookshops, which don't really exist now, But buy stuff in Spanish and stuff in English, and I just started to think about it, and I thought, right, let's pick the Romantics and go from sort of when the French invaded Seville at the beginning of the 19th century until basically today. So 200 years of what's happened. And and of course, when you got into the 20th century, you had people like Ernest Hemingway and Orson Welles and all them, Mitchell and all them turning up and giving their view of, what they thought of Seville, which was sort of nearly 100 years later.
Here's a question for you, Tony. But the people like Hemingway, right? And go over to Seville with this idea of how it's going to be, and then they superimpose it on that, because people can go looking for that experience. I'm going to go there because I want to be a friend of the gypsies, and I want to breathe the air of the Andalusians, etc., etc. But actually, in real terms, it the hence influences in Bali or something like that. You know what I'm saying? They could go there saying, I'm going to have this experience by hook or by crook, and they sort of superimpose it, or was this a genuine reaction to what they saw?
I think it's a mixture of both. If you take George Borrow, an English writer from the 19th century, he arrived, and he wrote a book called The Zincali, which is based on not just Andalusian gypsies, but gypsies in Europe. But he spent a lot of time in Triana. And people use his words because at this time, the flamenco hadn't really come out. The world didn't know about flamenco. So he was writing about this style of music that he saw performed in the street or whatever. And a lot of flamencologists use his work today to work out the history of flamenco. But he's also been accused of sort of floritura, overdoing it. And like you say, some people came here and if they didn't get what they expected, then they wrote what they thought they should have had. Or, do you know what I mean? So you've got to pick between the pieces. But when you get respected writers like Richard Ford, for example, I think we can take what he said. Of course, he was an artist, so he drew a lot of stuff. So we've got stuff that we can look at now and think, wow, where's that gone? Or, doesn't that look different today?
So how much of the original of this 19th century stroke early 20th Seville is still standing, as it were? Because it doesn't go through the deprivations that we had during the Civil War that perhaps Toledo does or Toledo or Madrid. So if you wander through Seville now, you say the cathedral's not the same, but what are the places that you can visit without being sort of like hijacked?
I think the area of Santa Cruz is, to take out the tourist shops, but the actual streets and the monuments and that's still very much the same. But it's I think for me, it's the ambience is still there, the attitude of the people, because the Sevillans, again, they're completely different than the Malagueños, or, there's something there that still attracts people. And, when you're walking around the streets, it's still very old, and you go over into Triana, okay, it's modern today, but there's areas in Triana, if you go into the district, which wouldn't have changed much since when they were there.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, you think this whole Seville, but then there's a class in Seville, aren't there, who basically think they're like, the Pijos de Seville, which are like, as opposed to, so don't think, ladies and gentlemen, that Seville is like one homogeneous, because there are various stratas, aren't there, of class.
And of course, if you're from Triana, you're not from Seville, I mean, there's this thing between the Trianeros and the Sevillanos, and if you say to someone from Triana, oh, you're from Seville, they're likely to bob you because, they're not. They're from Triana. So there is, like you said, there's that two sides to Seville, the capital.
The book is called Seville, A Legacy of Enchantment. It's by Tony Bryant. It's speaking to today. Tony, if people want to follow you online, tell me you got a website, please, because I want people to go and flock and follow you.
I suppose the easiest thing is go on to my Facebook page, because you can go straight to the blog and to the website. It's Tony Bryant on Facebook, or check me out on Certain English, because I've been working for Certain English for 10 years, so a fine publication. I know Liz, the I think so, yeah. I've got to get that in. My editor will give me a...
Exactly. Get your feeling. This book is... And listeners, you can order it via our own virtual bookstore. This book is called Seville, A Legacy of Enchantment. It's by Tony Bryant. Tony, it's been absolutely brilliant to speak to you this morning.
And to you, Giles, and thanks very much for having me on.